Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the fourth, I think it is, sustainability TV show, part of the L4G.TV platform. And this show is all about sustainability, and we're looking to get plenty of other people who are involved in sustainability right around the country to get involved with this show so we can start to share some of the good stuff that's going on out there. With me today is Tim Watkins. Come and say hello, Tim.
Hi, Chris. Hi, everyone.
How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. So
Tim was just telling me that it was pretty sunny yesterday, but freak 3 high tides, cars got washed away in Wales.
Yes. There's that thing where people park next to the beach without thinking through that the tide might be out when you start, but 6 hours from now it's going to be in. So hopefully not too many people out to write their cars off. But some of the images that I've seen online, cars were totally flooded out. In the one they were floating off down the river. So I'd imagine that's going to be a complete write-off.
Well, if they manage to catch up with it, maybe. So absent today is Debi King, but she has a fabulous excuse. She's down in the Wye Valley. Is that far away from you, Tim? Is that
40, 50 miles away.
Okay, so she's almost down there joining you in Cardiff area. She's in the Wye Valley. She's on an aquaponics course this week, and she's going to come back next week and tell us all about it. So we'll briefly talk about aquaponics in a moment because she's down there to learn about it and also to enable us on this show to have a lot more information and connect with a lot more people who are in the aquaponics arena. Now, there's hydroponics and there's aquaponics. Now, what I understand the difference is that hydroponics is about recycling water in a way that kind of is a sort of contained system for hydration, as it were. But aquaponics is, hang on a second, hang on. Just my phone was going bananas in the corner. But aquaponics is where you try and create a system of using a sort of almost a closed system, but where you can create food from the byproducts of using fish as the kind of converter between it creates eating, obviously whatever they eat turns it into ammonia, and then bacteria or algae or whatever it is then converts that into nitrogen, and of course all things that grow need nitrogen, and that then passes through to plants and stuff to generate food. Now, I know that what's the fish that they use for this? There's a particular type of fish, isn't there?
It's all new to me, I'm afraid, Chris. I'm waiting for Debbie to talk about it.
There's a fish that they use, tapir, I think it's called.
Right, yes.
Which is a fish which doesn't mind having large tapir, which is it doesn't mind being amongst gazillions of the same fish. So I think it's an Indian fish, which basically it gets into these pools, the pools dry up and you get an increasing number of fish in a confined space of water. So it lends itself quite well to this kind of farming because it doesn't mind, the fish don't mind being amongst loads more of the same thing. However, other food products like root vegetables and stuff, they need a bit more than just nitrogen. They need sulfur, I think it is, and they also need another product.
With phosphates or the other.
Phosphates or something, which you can't get from the direct output only of fish. So it's how do you introduce those into that cycle? And I think this is what Debbie is hoping to learn, so that she can come back armed with this knowledge and we can start to create some real examples of these aquaponics. And I know she's passionate about wormeries, she's passionate about bees, she's passionate about creating decent compost and stuff. So this is another step in that journey, and I'm sure that there's going to be tremendous interest for this arena as we move forward, because if you can kind of grow food in a fairly small area on a fairly large scale, then that's brilliant, and it's self-sustaining, all very good stuff. So it's looking like that's something that we need to be considering in the future, Tim, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I have my experience of hydroponics from, going back nearly 10 years ago now, that somebody set up a cannabis factory in the building, in the flat above the office that I used to work in. Yeah. For about a year, we used to come in the morning and you could smell this sort of earthy smell of it, and wondering what it was.
Yeah.
And it was only that I think somebody from the water company came out, as they were saying they'd noticed a huge runoff of water in our premises.
Right.
Of course, when they went to look, these guys had tapped into the water supply. They'd kind of hacked the electricity supply. They had a whole hydroponic output going on up there. I think that, according to the police, there were tens of thousands of pounds worth of plants in there. As I said, had I have known that that was going on there, I'd have used it to subsidise the charity I was running rather than tell the police about it.
Well, I've just had a comment here from Vivek, as I know him. Vivek can have the Baindor Rao, but Vivek is his short name, and I know Vivek through some video that he used to be doing with a Karina Shepherd, who's unfortunately no longer with us. But he says here, aquaponics could be what is needed for our journey to Mars. NASA planning a manned mission to Mars, I read somewhere, and the spaceship has to be self-sustainable. That's possibly.
You certainly need to have that sort of stuff in place before you can even contemplate going to live anywhere other than Earth.
Yeah.
And it's got to be entirely recyclable.
So this was the old Star Trek days, wasn't it, where they had the food level or whatever it was, where they were growing all sorts of food to sustain the and I guess that's exactly what we're going to need. So so that's coming up. Not on this show. This show will probably be slightly abbreviated, but Tim, I put you and I billed you as our resident energy expert, and you got some stories that you've picked up in the news this week about energy.
Yeah, I mean, this is stuff that came out while everyone was looking at the election, and kind of all of that was in the news. So this is stuff people may not have picked up on. The first one was, because I think I said in the last program we did about energy that my view is that we're going to change totally over the next few years the way we do energy in this country. So we had the former chief executive of Scottish and Southern Electricity, a guy called Ian Marchant. He's now a sort of visiting lecturer in University of Edinburgh. So I'll quote him. He said, now there are already 1 million small generators from community-owned wind, small-scale biomass, rooftop wind and solar, and a decreasing number of the older large power stations. That trend will continue, and in 30 years' time, we will have millions and millions of small power stations in this country. He does qualify it by saying we will need a crisis, one that will lead to squeaky bum time night after night. The lights won't go out, but the price will be so high that heavy industry will be self-disconnecting, and this will force an apolitical, long-term, rational debate about energy.
Okay, so you said a lot there. Let's just break that down for a second. I would draw the analogy here between what he just said there and what the president of IBM said back in 1950. He stated at that time, I think we'll need about 6 computers. That should just about do it for the UK. Right. Now, if you look at the topology of energy, at the moment, the topology is centrally generated, a few designated highly or huge generation facilities, and then a distribution mechanism to get that to the homes. What do we have in the computing world today? We have each home with a capacity probably of 6 computers upwards. A car's got 60 to 70 computers in it as it goes. So we've now got a situation where we've got distributed computing technology. We still have the central services for things like the internet access and mass storage, but basically we have a distributed computing capacity. And I think what we're talking about here in the energy sector is actually following that path and that trend, which is we are all responsible for generating the electricity that we use. And this is about the greater picture of each and every single one of us needs to take responsibility for that. And harvesting that, those that are overproducing can take a benefit from that, and those that need extra energy can pay for that if they haven't got the capacity to generate it. And that's the model that he just described, and it's inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way the concern I've always raised is this problem with needing the crisis first, because people just aren't taking it seriously.
Absolutely right, and I think you're right. I don't think it will happen in the way that he thinks. I think it'll be a financial crash as opposed to an energy crash. I think the energy crash is going to be part of it in the end, because actually if you've got no money or the money's crashed, then how are you going to pay for any electricity? Who's going to bother doing it? And we're going to go through this whole exercise of energy problem, which is coming. And you told us that. It's in your book.
This is where the 2 other quotes that I had from the news last week that follow on from it. The one was Centrica, which is the parent company of British Gas. So they're right at the core of this centralized generating system that we currently have. So their CEO came out last week, and I'll quote him: "The energy landscape is rapidly changing with a trend away from large centralized power generation to decentralized technologies, much of it intermittent renewable generation." So they have totally reversed their company strategy away from building more gas-fired power stations. They've actually bought one of Europe's sort of most advanced green energy companies. That company is now going to lead Centrica's move into this decentralized world. The other interesting one that I picked up was Sainsbury's. They've got a senior manager called Paul Crew, who's their sustainability lead. And he's quoted in the media this week as saying he has sleepless nights over energy security and feared UK electricity demand outstripping supply. Now, what Sainsbury's have been doing quite quietly is they started generating their own energy. Okay. And he was saying they now run 10 of their stores in the UK now run on their own and it's renewable energy. They run on biogas. They're looking to actually generate the power for all of their supermarkets across the UK in the near future. Okay, I don't know how long that's going to take, but what was interesting was he was saying that Sainsbury's use 1% of the entire UK electricity output. So essentially, if they do what they're proposing, they're effectively taking 1% of the income that the energy companies have for generating centralized energy away. Now, I think if they gain a commercial advantage by doing this, then Tesco, Asda's, Waitrose, all of these other companies will be obliged to follow suit.
We won't get into a massive discussion about supermarkets and the problems and the challenges that are going on with them. But you're right in that if one does it, the others have to follow. In a similar way, if one starts introducing localized purchasing of products for resale locally, then obviously the others have to follow suit. So
yeah, absolutely.
That whole marketplace has to completely change its entire model, which is nothing about people in the stores. They can all do this, but the whole model is based around centralization and distribution. And it's the same way as the energy. When you say, well, we want distributed systems, suddenly it's like, that's like starting again.
Well, I mean, of interest, one of the things that's been discussed in the scientific press over the last couple of weeks is, essentially, we took a particular turn with electricity back at the turn of the 20th century when we chose alternating current over direct current. Now, the reason we did it is because alternating current is the best system for pushing electricity down transmission lines. Now, I don't know the physics of it, but it's to do with if the current is always going one way, then you get a block back of electrons. Whereas if the current alternates, it keeps the flow free.
Mm-hmm.
So then you lose less energy as heat if you use alternating current. So that's the system we have. The system we need if we're going to have a distributed system. So if you think about having a solar system on your roof, it might be that the thing you're going to power a lot of the time is going to be your laptop or something that actually runs on DC.
Yeah.
So at the moment, you've got a power station that has to step up the voltage to alternating current to send it down a transmission line. Then they have to step it back down in voltage to get it into your house. Then when you plug your laptop in, you've got something in the laptop that then converts the AC current into DC before it can be used.
Yeah.
Now, on a solar system, you'd have direct current being generated by the solar panel, which under the current systems, you're having to turn into AC in order to send it back to the grid. Yep. Whereas your ideal would actually be to have it go straight to DC, straight into your laptop. Cut out all of that energy conversion stuff that's actually removing power. So, because every time you convert the energy, it's losing energy. So it would actually be more efficient for us to have household DC setups. Yeah, I mean, it may be that you need somewhere to convert to AC in order to have what remains of the centralized system to share the power around. But under a DC system, it would become much more localized. Whatever spare capacity my solar panels were using, if I wasn't using it, it'd go to the people next door. And that's kind of how it would work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a whole new world, isn't it? I mean, Vivek has made another comment which is quite interesting. He basically said that rather than using the economic, which is it's we're not going to be able to afford it or something's going to break, it might be easier or might be better to do the energy shift on the sustainability tag, which would get people to make an emotional decision. I disagree actually with you, Vivek, because we've been banging the sustainability emotional drum, as has people like the Zeitgeist movement, for decades. And we've been telling people about global warming and everything else for decades. And the problem is that while things are continuing and there doesn't appear to be a problem, you're wasting your time to a certain extent. I'm not saying you're wasting it completely, but there's not enough people to create that movement. When you have an economic issue, people switch on the light and it doesn't go on, right? Or they're queuing up to pay and Sainsbury's Energy disappears and no one can pay. Or, they go to work and the factory's shut, so you're not going to get paid and the factory's not going to produce anything. These are absolute non-negotiable issues which force people to make it. Whether we like it or not, people seem to only do things if they're forced to do them. There is this whole issue of apathy. I would love it if people paid more attention to the sustainability drum and they said, yeah, we're going to buy some seeds, we're going to start using our garden, we're going to start growing our own vegetables, we're going to start putting solar panels on our roof, we're going to make our own solar panels, we're going to stick a wind thing in the garden, and we're going to just go the whole hog and start to look to take ourselves out of the grid. I would love it if people did that. But the trouble is you have to make too many changes in your life to be able to do that. And the only way you're going to be able to do it is say, you can't do it like that anymore. You got to do it like this.
Yeah, I think when people start losing their jobs, recently in South Wales, we've had this crisis with the steelworks there. Now, okay, energy isn't probably the main issue there, but they have said that energy costs are one of the concerns. I think you're going to find businesses increasingly saying, well, look, if we've got to keep paying more and more for a less secure energy supply, now either they're going to do what Sainsbury's are doing, which is say, well, we're locked out and just do our own, and the rest of you can carry on, in which case the price to everyone else is going to go through the roof. Or basically you have your crisis that people, businesses close, they relocate somewhere in the world that still has cheap energy. So those are the kind of hard choices that face us. I think the issue to me is much less to do with how we get to the crisis as to what we do when we get there. So the real problem, the real issue to me isn't necessarily sustainability or even the economics. It's about the physics. So essentially, you've got to work out which technologies out of the ones we're left with give us the best bang for our buck. At the moment, onshore wind is probably the best we've got available in terms of the energy it delivers for the resources and the energy needed to erect the wind farms. But it's the one everybody hates. Nobody, even environmentalists, like the idea of wind farms as long as they're on somebody else's hill. So again, I think you only address that at the point where people realize that, hang on, it's either have a wind farm on top of the hill or don't have any electricity. At that point, people may start to say, actually, wind farms might be a good idea. But until people realize that kind of, oh, hang on, this is going to hit me personally, then I really don't see us doing anything about it. I mean, at the moment, government is concerned with how do we keep prices low for consumers. They're not even seeing the problem.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Vivek has commented again. He said, if Sainsbury's or any big names like that take a lead and start using sustainable energy without making an economic case, I mean, I don't know whether what their case will be is we want to use sustainable energy because it's sustainable.
Yeah.
And actually what they're really saying is we no longer trust the energy suppliers to be able to produce the energy at the right price in enough volume for us to put our faith in it anymore.
I mean, what Sainsbury's have done, which is probably peculiar to that industry perhaps, is they've got a lot of food waste at the end of each week that can't be handed on even under the sort of various schemes we have now to reuse food. Basically, they still produce a lot of waste that basically can't be fed to humans or animals. It's just going to be dumped. So what they've started doing is biodigesting that biomass and turning it into gas. And they're using that to fuel their gas on-site turbines.
Okay.
So essentially, they're taking something that they're already doing and working it in a way to kind of generate electricity for themselves. So I think that model becomes much more viable as the cost of the centralized system goes up.
Yeah, but the other issue with this, Tim, is you're still centralised in terms of a model for supermarkets, and what we're basically doing is digesting a load of food that we shouldn't have been on the shop.
Should never have had it in the first place.
So yes, it's sustainable, but it's not sustainable forever because when Sainsbury's realise that they're keeping a whole store going on effectively digested food that's not been sold for a profit, they're going to basically have to keep scaling down until they disappear.
Well, I guess the other side of it is there's a limit to how much of that you can do. I think in a way it's interesting just for a direction of travel rather than, so I'm not saying that Sainsbury's scheme works. In fact, I think biodigestion should only be seen as a partially renewable energy source anyway. As you get to a point where in order to create the biomass, you start eating into land that you need for food production. So once you get to the point that you're having to produce new biomass just to keep your turbines going, it's no longer renewable.
That's right.
So it's one of these that kind of works at a small scale. Now, as I say, okay, for the moment, Sainsbury's would have only dumped that biomass anyway. So the fact that they can now recycle it, that's great as far as it goes. I think the model for me, though, is that, any company that's got a building will look at that and say, well, why don't we put solar panels on the roof?
Well, and also, why don't we buy 10% less product and then we won't have to put it through the... Oh, hang on. So they're paying for the gas in the first place. They're paying for it, aren't they?
The obvious corollary to that is if all of us are faced with a decentralizing system, probably through a crisis, then at least half of the answer is how do I cut down on my energy waste? Because at the moment, we've a whole generation from my age upwards have enjoyed effectively abundant access to cheap energy.
Mm.
You know, although we complain about the bills and we, I mean, that's our monthly or quarterly whinge, the fact of the matter is our energy costs have been very low compared to other places in the world. So we've kind of got used to that I can turn a light on or flick a switch and have something switch on without worrying about it.
Yeah.
Okay, I might have a grumble when my bills come in at the end of the quarter, but actually I can deal with it. Going forward, as that system starts to break down, prices start to increase, shortages come around. As you say, you come home from work, it's cold and rainy outside, you go to flick on the light and the heating, and nothing happens. You go to the kitchen and you can't cook anything because the cooker won't work, and so you've got to sit there in the dark. You haven't even got any candles because we stopped making candles when we started doing electricity. You might, if you're lucky, you'll have a couple of them little tea lights that you use for your oil burner or something.
Yeah, bring back the candlestick maker.
Yeah, and of course, if we go back to candles, that automatically puts our fire service under strain because they've got to start putting fires out again. So there are no easy wins within that. But at that point, okay, all of us at that point are forced into thinking through how do we conserve energy.
And I think for as almost like to wrap this particular session up, I think what we're saying here, and this is absolutely part of what Link for Growth is all about. And this show is about saying to people, look, start, because we've had we're having at the moment the conversations about, look, if you can buy from a local supplier that which you would have bought from somewhere else, but it's kind of a bit more expensive, but you're saving on the transportation cost, you're saving on polluting the planet, you're buying from a local person, you're keeping the local money in the local economy, which is all good stuff. You're building relationships with local people who will help you out in a pinch because you're buying from them. What we're saying here is that the consideration of buying from a local person. What we're saying on sustainability here is the consideration about recycling, the consideration about energy, the consideration about transportation, the consideration about growing your own food. There's all this stuff that we can consider. Now, it might be that we're not in the right place to do some of it, but we must be in the right place to do something.
Well, I mean, I particularly like the Link for Growth idea of starting to get a movement going on the coffee union.
Yeah.
Because actually, one of the things people used to do, go back to anywhere from the 1950s backwards, one of the reasons you had so many public houses was that's where you went to get warm in the evening. Because basically you couldn't afford to heat your own house, so you had a public place that you went to that had heating on. So it could be that we could actually move to a situation where you can go to the local coffee house in the evening. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff going on with some of the Link for Growth ones where you have people coming in and giving talks and stuff. There's a possibility for something in a community that provides you with your warmth for the evening, so that when you go home, all you need really is a half-decent duvet and maybe a hot water bottle. But there you've saved a lot of energy by having a communal space. That part of the cost of that will go into what you pay for your cup of tea or coffee. So you're kind of covering it that way. So things like that become a viable kind of part of that energy mix.
Yeah, and I think that point you made there in terms of the coffee shops and stuff, we ought to make more of that, because from a sustainability perspective, if you've got to heat, your own home, for example, there's 6.7 million independent businesses out here with 5 or less employees. If those people were going to the local coffee shop to use their Wi-Fi to have a cup of coffee or 2 or 3 or 4 and to sit there in the warm and work, that saves heating a whole 3-bedroom house or 2-bedroom house. Actually, it starts to become a really viable alternative and something that we should be encouraging. We've had another question in, not a question, but a statement in from Vivek, who's been very, very good, Vivek. I'm very impressed, and a few more people should be doing this so we can actually bring you into the conversations that we're having during the show, which would be brilliant. He said somehow we need to convert the NIMBYs. These are the people like the guy in Canada who was up for fracking, but not in my backyard. Thank you very much. Into BIMBYs, which are beauty in my backyard, which is, if you try. Now, I'm a little bit struggling with this, Vivek, so bear with me, but he's basically saying, if we can convert people on an emotional level to start thinking about the beauty in their back garden, you won't need the economic model. The problem that we've got at the moment is the sheer volume of people who are still working for profit rather than planet, and that's the real big issue. It will require a massive shift of people, which hasn't been successful over the last 20 years. I'm not saying it won't be successful. It's going to require a massive shift. There is going to be an economic collapse, and it is going to be quite quick, and it isn't going to be 20 years in the future. So, albeit that we should be always pioneering to create bimbis, not nimbis, and we should be getting all of these people that are passionate about the planet working together, and that's part of what Link for Growth is all about. That's part of what this show is all about, is about getting these people together so we can do more, we can celebrate what we're doing, and we can double it, triple it, 1,000 times the effort and energy that's going into what we're doing. But it's not going to be, I don't believe personally, it's not going to get the momentum it really needs until people start having trouble putting food on the table, and that's the point where you don't get thousands of people involved, you get millions of people involved. And that's not far away. Because if we listen to what you're saying, Tim, there is no real plan for energy in the next 5 years that's going to be of sufficient scale.
I think the danger is if we don't start to make people aware of the alternatives, what we get is a kind of knee-jerk sort of, oh my God, build nuclear, open up coal-fired power stations, let's go with what we know. And you'll get that kind of fear response out of the population. Because once the lights start going off, the jobs start going, everyone starts panicking. What do we know how to do? Well, we know how to generate electricity from coal. We know how to do it with gas and oil. So you're then eating into these limited fossil fuel supplies that are getting more and more expensive every day. The danger is we get that kind of knee-jerk reaction if people aren't aware of what the problem is and what the potential solutions are that are out there. So in a way, that's what I'm about, is raising awareness of the issue and starting to put together what would a distributed energy system look like as an alternative. In a way, I think you're right that it's not pleasant because it means that we can't carry on doing what we've been doing. That suddenly you're going to have to think things through. Right? Do I put the computer on this evening or do I put the telly on? Do I cook a meal this evening or do I put the heating on?
And that's they're quite important points to make. And I think what we have to do with what we're doing with Link for Growth really is keep on raising awareness and expand and grow the awareness to the point where people are starting to question what they're doing, and by doing that, reining in their expenditure, reining in their consumption, because we are over-consuming. There is no question we are over-consuming, and if we carry on over-consuming, we're going to need 7 planets to consume all the stuff we're consuming. So the only solution to this is take what you need, and what you need is water, food, shelter, a bit of heat from a variety of potential sources, and connections, people who will look after you if things get tough, relationships, not money. You can't eat money, doesn't make you warm.
Well, I suppose the notes will do for a brief period while you're burning them.
The
thing is, the future we're looking at isn't actually that grim. I mean, it could be potentially if we really mess up. But actually, there's scope there within a distributed system to do a lot of the things that we currently do if we use our heads about how we do them. And a classic would be, particularly in your neck of the woods, the number of people that commute into London to sit in an office on a computer, but they could have stayed at home and just connected online.
Yeah, now that is an interesting point. And of course, through what we're doing here today, 3 months ago, you being on a TV show was a pie in the sky. It takes a little bit of education, a little bit of knowledge, and suddenly we've got an opportunity to do something that was unavailable before because of a lack of understanding. And of course, education of we should have put in fibre down the whole country years ago, but obviously BT want to keep their profits and everything else, and so consequently it was all staved off. That would have been the right thing to do years ago, 20 years ago. Anyway, we are where we are, but you're absolutely right. And actually an increasing number of people are staying at home and not going on the train, but the trains are still full. So I don't know who keeps getting on the train.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're just making way for somebody else.
Yeah.
See, the problem is, I mean, I picked up a survey, I forget who did it, I mean, going back about 2-3 years ago. It's one of the American universities that had done a survey on, like, where are you most creative? So anyway, they had a list of places. A lot of people used to quite like in the summer sitting out on the patio with a cup of coffee and their laptop, and they'd get stuff done. Certainly working at home, a lot of people had. If you go to the local coffee house again, that was quite productive. The least productive place you had was the office. And you think that's the place that the employer keeps insisting people go. And so essentially employers are making people go and sit in the least productive place that they've got. It's full of interruptions. You start having meetings that are completely worthless. All of that wasted time and energy. Whereas if people work from home, it costs you a hell of a lot less to run a business, and you get more output.
Well, I think that's because a lot of people still, and I think it's changing, but a lot of people still are measuring people by whether they're present or not, rather than whether they've completed tasks or not. And actually, we're moving to a more task-orientated environment. That's about collaboration. It's about bringing teams together who do bits of the job, but of course they have to do the bit that they've been asked to do, because that's by being in the team is all about. So consequently, I think there is a move. I think it needs to accelerate, and it will accelerate. We're looking at big companies now like BHS, and I think one of the Taylors went down this week as well, or last week. We've got a move away from large organisations, which are by their very default huge energy consumption, huge office space and rates and rent that needs to be paid. For what? For an ego. An ego to say, look at our offices, look how wonderful they are. Who buys from an office? They buy people. And consequently, that whole model, I think, is coming to the end of its lifespan, fortunately, and we can perhaps use these buildings for much more effective and creative purposes rather than housing people who can do what they do at home or in a local coffee shop.
One of the big trends that's been happening, certainly since the crash, has been the amount of commercial property that's being turned into residential.
Absolutely.
Part of that started just because a lot of companies went bust and there was a lot of empty premises. But I think there is a trend within that to saying, well, look at what an office costs you against what you get back from it. Because a lot of your customers are online now, so it isn't that somebody is coming to your office or your shop anymore. Or if they are, they don't have to. It's perfectly acceptable to have a website that displays all your products, and you can certainly talk to somebody by Skype or over the phone. You haven't got to go in. There may be, specialist outlets. Yes, they're going to continue. But yes, even the supermarkets are moving into click and collect and delivery services and stuff. So that's moving more to a that you have a warehouse somewhere, somebody emails in or goes online and makes their order and it gets delivered, or they go and collect. So that's the direction of travel in the immediate short term. So I think longer term we're moving into a wholly different way of doing things.
Absolutely.
As I said, my fear, going back to the energy front, is the initial part of that is likely to be unpleasant, because we've got to disengage. We're going to disengage from a centralized system that grew up in the 20th century, and we've got to somehow get into place a distributed system for the 21st century. And the two are actually quite different things.
Yeah, and I think what we need on this is instead of people coming out of college with their being lobotomized and being told how to think, if we can maintain or increase the creative thinking, the problem solving, there's a whole host of young brains out there that are waiting for something to get their teeth stuck into and prove their value. And if we could just pick up that group of people, and people like us can give them our experience and knowledge and tell them how not to do it, then they might be able to go away and create the future that they're going to have to live in, because it's not us that's going to be living in it, it's them that's going to be living in it. So Vivek has said on here, last comment, you are already using an emotional argument, just do more of it. So thank you, Vivek, for that final comment, and lovely to have you on that side of the computer, as it were, putting in some stuff for us to talk about, without which this has been a very short show. So thank you, Tim. We'll have Debbie back next week, fresh from her Aquaponics.
Be able to figure out which fish it is and which, what we do with them. And
I think it's tapir or something. Yeah. Anyway, I think it's something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to hear. There's not something I've come across before, so it's I'm sure it will play a part in the future that we're about to have.
Yep, I wouldn't agree. I would agree, definitely. Okay. Thanks, Tim, for being on the show, as always. And thank you, viewers, for watching this interesting debate on energy and a little bit on aquaponics. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks' time, which is going to be the, 16th, 23rd, is it? To talk about aquaponics. I have no doubt that by that time, Debbie will have got herself sorted out and she'll be able to give us a coherent understanding of what aquaponics can do for us all. So, until then, thanks from you, Tim.
Yeah, bye now.
Bye now. And thanks for watching. And cheerio from me. Bye now.